Well, things aren't looking good in Argentina. It's obstacle after obstacle, challenge after challenge, and it seems impossible to overcome. The economy isn't doing well, there are protests on the street, and the provincial government wants to issue their own currency. Now, just imagine if Texas suddenly rejects the dollar to issue their own form of money, and that's how crazy things have gotten. The crisis Argentina faces is simple but very deadly, and there's a historic rise in prices that's making everyone a whole lot poorer. Argentina's inflation has breached 211% in 2023. Prices rose by over 25% in December alone, thanks to Milei devaluing the Argentine peso by 54%. However, the bad news will continue for the rest of 2024. In January and February, inflation is expected to rise again by 20% each month. Buying power will continue to collapse throughout this year. To combat inflation, Milei is moving to cut government spending and raise taxes, but that is going to crush the economy into the ground. It's already sparking protests on the streets because people are going to lose their jobs. According to the IMF, Argentina will face 2 years of back-to-back recession, 24 months of economic contraction at the very least. 2024 will see the economy crash by 2.8%, and this follows a 1.1% decline last year. And we all know the IMF puts a positive spin on everything, right? So the recession is probably far worse than we all expect. Milei is basically in a time crisis. To get inflation down, he has to destroy demand. And to destroy demand, he's cutting away government jobs while raising taxes. But can he reach the finish line without the country exploding into chaos? And that's the $1 trillion question. Because Argentinians are getting squeezed everywhere they turn. YPF, Argentina's national oil company, just raised prices at the pump by 6% again to consumers in the country. Other companies are also doing the same. Milei wants to remove price controls in the country, including diesel and gasoline. The idea once again revolves around fighting inflation while ramping up government revenues. By allowing oil companies to set the prices themselves, Milei can get more in taxes while decreasing demand by jacking up prices at the pump. But in the short term, this paradoxically adds more fuel to the inflation fire, and he's pushing to prohibit the government from reducing local crude prices to keep domestic fuel cheap. And if this passes, Argentinians will see fuel prices fly up again, which is another form of austerity. Big oil can now dictate how much to charge local consumers in the country. Milei is trying to destroy demand through higher prices the capitalist way. In theory, this should work, right? But the issue is whether he has enough runway to make it happen. Because parts of Argentina are starting to rebel against the national currency. No one trusts the peso anymore, including the provincial government. In a shocking story, an Argentine province plans to issue its own currency, enraging Javier Milei. It's a challenge to the austerity agenda and threatens Milei's final plan of dollarizing the economy. Honestly, this was an own goal by Milei. Back in 2023, he defended the idea of free competition of currencies to get rid of the peso. So someone is now challenging the central government on this. The province of La Rioja wants to launch the Bocade, a new local currency to pay part of the public servants' salaries after a strike. They plan to issue over $27 billion worth to complement the Argentine peso. And under this new law, 30% of state salaries will be paid in the Bocade. In La Rioja, 65% of workers are employed by the local government. So this move is very consequential. They have a lot of bargaining power. And it's easy to understand why, right? It all has to do with inflation and people's anger against Malay's sudden currency devaluation. Because of the 54% adjustment down to the peso, the purchasing power of people they have just collapsed. Over the past year, the Argentine peso has crashed against the US dollar. The official rate went from 200 pesos a dollar to over 800. But for the black market rate, the devaluation is much worse. Hitting 1200 pesos per dollar is a drop of almost 90%. Imagine the loaf of bread going from $1 to $10 in just 12 months. And that's how insane Argentina's economy has truly become. People are getting poorer literally every single day. And putting money in the bank also isn't a solution. Inflation is above 200% in Argentina, while the interest rate is only at 100%. So prices are still doubling for you even if you stash your money in a savings account. Your wealth is still getting wiped out. And this kind of changed the behavior of savers and turns them into desperate consumers. You rather buy and spend your pesos today to buy hard assets like gold or exchange them for US dollars in the black market. That ironically destroys the peso's exchange rate, further causing inflation to go higher. However, local currencies won't work. It will only generate more chaos because it's simply money printing all over again. Firstly, the bouquet won't be backed by anything. It won't be tied to the commodities or the taxpayer base of Argentina. This makes it even riskier than the peso. Secondly, Milei has confirmed that the national government won't rescue the currency if it crashes and burns, so holders of the bouquet will be carrying the bag. If you're a business, you either reject them or demand double the amount. And this causes inflation to get further out of control. Project this out to the other provinces of Argentina, and you realize how serious this problem truly is. Milei shock therapy is pushing local governments to the point of desperation, and when you're desperate, you do crazy things. Issuing local currencies backed by nothing is even worse than using the peso, and that's a very low bar of comparison here. Inflation is the biggest crisis Milei faces today. It's the classic chicken and egg problem, right? To solve inflation, you need to crush demand, but in crushing demand, you risk destabilizing the whole country. And this situation has evolved into dangerous protests. Malay's omnibus reform bill is highly unpopular and protesters went postal outside Congress. There are demonstrations and police, just total mayhem in Argentina because Malay's reform are truly draconian. To bring down inflation, Milei is moving to impose austerity measures the country has never seen before. The reform package passed includes two critical details that will change everything in the economy. Many state entities will begin to privatize, and this means, of course, firing Argentina's bloated workforce. More layoffs are coming, and tens of thousands of jobs will be gone. The second is reducing general state subsidies for the people, which is going to outrage a ton of people, right? This alone will change everything. During the previous president's term, there were price controls for household goods, subsidies for public services, and minimum wage adjustments. He even banned beef exports to reduce prices. So the people, they are all used to the government subsidizing their cost of living. Now, taking this away is the equivalent of removing unemployment benefits in America. People will lose their minds, they'll just riot. The subsidies aren't 10% or 20%, they are perhaps the highest in the world. Argentina's subsidies have gone well above 70% of expenses. The majority of government services to the people are subsidized. Water supply, for example, is heavily discounted by over 70%. The final bill is only 30% of the original amount. Just the energy subsidies in 2021 alone accounted for over 2% of Argentina's GDP. So you can imagine the enormous fiscal strain it imposes on the economy. For bigger places like the US, China, or the EU, subsidies are more sustainable. They have a bigger tax base, their currencies are stable, the people are more richer, and they are bigger exporters to the world. So they have the reserves that they can spend, or like the US, they can just print the money, right? But not so much for Argentina. And here's how expensive just the energy subsidies are. In 2022, it cost the Argentine government over $12 billion to manage the cost of gas, power, and water for the people. For many periods, it stayed well above $10 billion a year. Argentina is burning through a ton of dollars to keep the lights on. At the same time, this is also devaluing what's left of their local currency. Their foreign exchange reserves have dropped dangerously almost every single month. It has dropped from $34 billion 12 months back down to under $19 billion. And this is a big problem, especially when you're giving out a ton of generous subsidies to the people. You are draining the reserves while taxing high income residents up to 80% of the cost. And that's a big recipe for disaster which is unsustainable. You'll drain away the productive parts of your economy and leave it as an empty shell. So Milei likely only has a few years to prove that his shock therapy can work. It's not that he's doing the wrong thing, right? It's just that the odds are stacked against him. There are only two ways to reverse Argentina's inflation crisis. The first is to increase exports to bring in dollars and explode the supply of goods to overwhelm demand. But that can't be done overnight. So Milei is left with the darker, the worst option, which is to destroy demand and make everyone poorer to reduce consumption. Kind of like what the Federal Reserve did 2 years back, right? And it seems that the IMF loves this idea of making everyone a whole lot poorer. From Bloomberg, Milei wins IMF approval to secure $4.7 billion payout. Even as Milei reduced his austerity measures, the IMF loves his plan of demand destruction. But let's be constructive here. $4.7 billion isn't a lot of money. This is a stopgap measure. It's a delay tactic to give Milei a longer runway to save Argentina. And every time the IMF disperses a ton of money to Argentina, they quickly burn through the amount within a matter of months. It happened back in January and April last year, and it's likely going to happen once again. Milei's crisis is trying to reduce consumption and boost government revenues without the whole country revolting against him. He can't go all the way to the edge, to the ends of the world and destroy demand, which means more pain for a longer period of time. And to pass the omnibus bill, Milei was forced to live out sweeping changes that would increase government revenues. For example, tax hikes on major exports like soy and an income tax increase will be scrapped. Remember that it's both good and bad at the same time. The good news is that it allows farmers to increase production and export more to the world. People also have more money to spend. But on the flip side, it will mean burning through the IMF money fast and Argentina requiring to get further into debt, which again places tremendous pressure on the peso. Inflation is just gonna get worse. So it's a vicious cycle that has trapped the country. And considering China's currency swap line has been cancelled, it just makes things worse. Argentina will need more dollars, which means borrowing more money. Milei's government owes $400 billion to the world, of which 110 billion is owed to the IMF alone. Other countries have also lent Argentina a lot of money to stay afloat. Qatar, for example, has loaned Argentina nearly $800 million at an interest rate of 4% per annum, and it's money borrowed to pay back the previous IMF loan. So it's a case of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. It's not sustainable in the long run. Sooner or later, creditors will come knocking for their money, which Milei either has to pay back or default on the loan. And this brings us to another risk Milei is taking, and is perhaps the biggest gamble of all, which is trying to privatize the entire Argentine economy. And this includes the national oil company and the airline as well. And when you privatize anything, especially in Argentina, you have to cut away all the excesses, which means a ton of job losses. Even before he took office, Milei got rid of 5,000 government employees. So you can just imagine the amount of panic people are having for the months and the years ahead. And things are getting even more suspicious. Milei is also moving ahead with a meeting with BlackRock's Larry Fink to bring investments back to Argentina. And this presents very big questions for the Argentine people. Will he be opening up the economy for genuine investments? Or will he be taken advantage of by vultures? And we won't know until the shoe drops. A big concern today is how Milei will privatize Argentina's national oil company, YPF. He's facing big headwinds trying to turn the state oil company private, and there's a very good reason why. As it stands, Argentina is experiencing an oil production boom. Over the past 3 years, Argentina's production has increased by over 50% thanks to shale oil. Their output is about to hit 800,000 barrels a day, putting them on par with Venezuela. So there's money in the country, they're extremely resource rich. And the big question is if Milei can unlock the economy safely or see the resources get plundered away with little to show for it. We just have to wait and see, and until that happens, the country will be locked in an inflation hell. But let me know what you think. Can Milei save Argentina from a total collapse, or is this just mission impossible? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.